Woman Finds Tape is a 2025 found footage movie in the kind of mockumentary style. And to describe this one, I would say it starts off a little bit Stephen King and kind of ends up in Lovecraft territory. So what's the story? Now, this is somewhat of a surreal found footage movie in some respects, and it's a little hard to follow. It focuses on a brother and sister who grew up in this small American town. The sister has moved away for a while, and her brother is this kind of, I guess you would call social media influencer. But he basically discovers this kind of strange tape, hence Man Finds Tape, in his parents' barn. And it appears to show him as a boy with someone coming into his room and doing weird things. Not sexual things, I should point out, but, you know. And this catapults him into kind of viral stardom with kind of conspiracy theories and all the rest of it. And there seems to be a phenomena in this small town where people suddenly go into like a trance and just kind of stop what they're doing. And this actually leads to a guy stopping in the middle of the street and getting run over. And to make matters worse, no one can really remember anything about it once they've awoken. And even if they are shown video footage of this incident, they kind of pass out while the footage is playing, and so they can't even sort of watch this footage. Only the sister, who has moved away from the town, is able to really watch it without it being kind of affected by it. So we follow our brother and sister and this other woman to try and find out what's kind of going on and what could be involved, who could be involved, and is there some type of supernatural, maybe even cryptid kind of component to it. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. Now, we'll start off with the positives. I would say this is quite an original story. I will give it this. You know, it has a mystery element to it, and I don't want to spoil anything for you clearly, but it's one that will kind of keep you guessing, partly to its detriment, I will say. But you know, you won't really guess really what the kind of where it's going. It's somewhat of a unique film in that regard. And without really giving you too many details, you know, we have this strange, what almost appears to be an atmospheric phenomena potentially, leading to maybe more of a biological one, or maybe a kind of supernatural one. And as they say, it sort of starts off almost like a kind of, like a Stephen King inspired sort of story, but it ends up in a much more Lovecraft sort of second half of the movie, where we kind of learn a little bit more about what's kind of going on and what's involved. And that's really all I'm going to say in regards to describing things here. But it does have some gross elements to it, and it ends up being an intriguing story that gives you some idea about what's kind of going on, but I certainly wouldn't say it explains everything, and does leave a lot of its cards on the table to be somewhat unexplained. And I guess this is the thing with the found footage movie, you know, in its format, because you know you can't necessarily expect every question to be answered, because you are following the journey of the people involved in making the footage, so to speak. Therefore, not everything might be revealed to them. So it's not like a typically filmed movie where, you know, the camera is showing us everything. This one, it doesn't show us everything. So, you know, it's an intriguing movie that I think gives you, you know, a fair idea about what's kind of going on. And certainly, you know, you might not get the gist of everything, but you'll get enough to understand the broad strokes of the story, I would say. It does have some sort of more grotesque VFX. Nothing gory necessarily, but there are some sorts of grotesque things that happen. it's all sort of quite grainy and low res found footage when we do see these kind of more overt, and I presume this is to hide some of the VFX, if I'm honest. But nonetheless, the idea here is quite grotesque, and although it's not like, you know, explicitly gonna kind of freak people out, it's still, the idea of it is a little nasty, I would say. The acting is fairly solid. I have seen some criticisms about the acting, but I don't think it's necessarily bad acting at all here. You know, I think everyone does a decent enough job. And yeah, it's again, if you want something a little different from a found footage movie, a bit of a unique story that has elements of maybe vampirism, of kind of cryptid, of a kind of just a sci-fi mystery, then I would suggest maybe checking it out. Let's talk about what doesn't work. The movie is clearly quite low budget, and I think some of the budget makes the movie has its limitations. As I say, when we do see the more overt VFX, they've deliberately kind of used particularly sort of grainy footage to clearly hide low budget VFX and things like this. And there's a couple of times when you'll see maybe a little bit better quality, and then it doesn't look quite as good. I think the main issue for me, however, is the story, as I say, deliberately tries to be somewhat surreal, somewhat vague, and I think it could be potentially quite frustrating. Because even if you understand most of it, the movie still doesn't tell you all of the answers deliberately so. But I think some people will just be a little lost in this movie, understandably so, because the movie is trying to be vague. It is trying to be a movie that is meant to be mysterious and not tell you everything. And okay, you get the idea that they're, you know, who's involved and maybe what they are or what they're trying to do, but not exactly, you know, all of the answers will be given here. I also think there are some elements here that seem, you know, a little bit hard pushed at times. I mean, for example, and I'll take something relatively innocuous to not spoil anything here. So, you know, we have this initial the man finds tape. The title of the movie is because this guy, Lucas, finds this, like, cassette that shows footage of him as a boy and someone kind of coming into his room. And this goes viral. But I don't really know why, because it doesn't really show you anything, to be honest. And there's all these conspiracy theories and everything. And I was thinking, this looks like just so old dark footage of something like, it could be a parent just waking up a kid. I mean, it's like, there's nothing really on the screen. It's hard pressed to believe that this would be a viral footage, to be honest, because there's really nothing in this initial kind of like segment, and it's like we just have to believe that he's got millions of kind of subscribers because of this, and there's all these conspiracy theories when it's really nothing. And then we have to look at the conceit of you know, people aren't able to watch this kind of footage that is has been filmed. So there's like security footage of an incident where someone's getting kind of run over because they're just sort of like, you know, effectively passed out in a way, and the person driving the car also is just kind of frozen. And there's a variety of other people in the street, but so no one can watch this without kind of sort of passing out again. But how is a supernatural force going to influence digital technology or analog technology? Things like this. So you've got to have that suspension of disbelief. Or even if it did, you know, why not kind of change the format? Why not take still images of it? Things like this. I mean, it's never really sort of explained, or why isn't this footage shown to someone? If the sister isn't affected because she's left town, maybe show other people who have not in the town. Again, it's just there's a lot of things here that I think the movie just kind of brushes over in regards to having some sort of, oh, we need to have this spooky mystery. It doesn't really make kind of sense when you kind of like think too much about it, however. And as the movie goes on with it, the deliberately vague things about, there's two kind of characters that are, I guess you would call our, you know, antagonists to a degree. And again, it's extremely vague about the relationship and what's going on with these two sort of characters and stuff, to the point where I feel it is a little bit frustrating. The final thing I'll say on the negatives, I feel this movie, it kind of ends and then doesn't stop. It has about 10 minutes where I feel the movie could have naturally ended, and I don't really feel like it needed to have like this long kind of sequences afterwards where I didn't really feel it added much to the story. Overall, I commend the film for being an original idea and maybe presenting you a story, a supernatural force maybe that you haven't seen at all or very much. But I think it was done in a way that isn't particularly accessible, and I think it leaves too many questions on the table, some of which are deliberate, some of which I think were just, you know, just not particularly well thought out. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What were your thoughts? Please leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.